Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and today was the start of the Formula E 2024 Championship, Season 10 of Formula E, coming to us from Mexico City, and I was really looking forward to watching this race. I've been missing Formula E quite a bit. I could do with some chaos in my life. Well, actually no, I could do with less chaos in my life, but it's a different kind of chaos. Unfortunately, this was a pretty dull way to start the year. And we'll get into that. But it does make me wonder, is Formula E moving in the wrong direction? Because I've complained about the overabundance of gimmicks. I didn't like fan boost, and thankfully they've got rid of it. I've never been a particularly big fan of attack mode, but now I'm wondering if they got rid of it, would I miss it? Starting at Misano, which I think is round 5, they're going to bring in fast charging, so there's pit stop strategies. To me, you don't need that and attack mode, but given this race was pretty boring, maybe they do. Or maybe it shows that attack mode doesn't add anything to the actual racing, and it depends on the racing to be good, and attack mode's just there. And therefore, maybe get rid of attack mode and just have the fast charging, if that's what you want to do. And I do think fast charging will help, because it means they'll have more energy, I guess. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work, what the rules around it are going to be, which I'm sure they'll explain to us, at least I hope they do. But without all the little gimmicks attached, when we do have a dull race like this, it does make me question, what is it about Formula E that works, and just what is holding it back? Because we're on 10th season, we've worked through the kinks at this point. This is what Formula E should be. They've established an identity. And the issue I have with that identity is at times they just seem to tack on superfluous rubbish, just like attack mode and fan boosts. But the energy saving part of it and energy management, that part was all very, very clever and added to the strategy, gave it a unique identity, and was part of the branding. I always really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I still do. It's very, very clever how the teams have to work that out as the race is progressing. But I think maybe these gimmicks are part of the branding. Maybe Formula E does need these things to stand out. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how fast charging changes things up a bit. As I said, this race was pretty dull. Don't take anything away from Pascal Wehrlein. He drove fantastically in this race, and it was pretty easy for him in the end. Great win for Porsche. Jaguar had both cars up there as well. But everything that happened in this race happened in the first 10 laps. After that, there wasn't really even any overtaking. In fact, on the final lap, you had Mitch Evans leading a train of 8 cars, but none of them overtook each other. There wasn't really any attempts at overtaking, which is strange for a series that really usually has a lot of action throughout the race. Occasionally you get dull bits as people manage their energy, but it tends to be pretty frenetic at the start and the end of the race. But for some reason at Mexico, it just didn't happen like that. And there were a few casualties early on. Sergio Sette Camara didn't even start the race. Then we lost Di Grassi to a brake issue. Antonio Felix da Costa made contact with Nico Muller. Big rookie mistake from him. And we lost Robin Freins as well, which a great consistent driver. Apparently there was something wrong with his car that led to the accident, so it was a bit of a strange one, disappointing for him. Other than that though, the top 10, pretty much drivers you would expect to be there. Jake Dennis was maybe a little disappointing. He didn't come through the field more. He only finished 9th, but as I said, there wasn't a lot of overtaking, so he started in 14th, so it probably wasn't a bad race for him overall. But you had Wehrlein, Buemi, Cassidy in the podium places. That's not entirely surprising. Gunter did a really good job in this one. Evans was up there. Jake Hughes, actually, if it not for Pascal Wehrlein winning the race so easily, I'd probably say Jake Hughes was my driver of the race, just because he didn't drop out of the top 10, which he usually does. So 7th place for him is a good result. And Sam Bird, I think, started 11th and finished 13th or 14th, so it shows that maybe the McLaren's not really on the pace, and it was just actually a really good job from Jake Hughes. Or it might have just been that no one could overtake. But, I mean, there was no issues with energy management in this race. Everyone seemed to get it pretty much spot on. And it was a very clean race, with the exception of Antonio Felix da Costa. So that at least has to be applauded. It's just a shame that it was really boring. There was no overtaking, there wasn't really any battling, it wasn't all that close. And this is what I mean by, is Formula E going in the wrong direction? 2024 is one of the first seasons where there's, I think at least, there's more racetracks than street circuits. Formula E has predominantly been on street circuits. It's flirted with racetracks, and there's sort of been a few more appearing over the last couple of years. But it really, there was, the first few seasons at least, 100% of it was pretty much on street circuits. I don't know if there were. I don't know what the first race circuit in Formula E was. I'm sure there may have been one early on. I'm not entirely sure. But predominantly it was street circuits. And as we get less and less of those, I do sort of wonder, were they part of Formula E's identity? That they were on these unique street circuits that were just set up anywhere, any city that wanted to host him, they could have a Formula E race. It meant no one really got used to the tracks because the calendars were changing quite a lot. And it was interesting. They were just interesting circuits to race at. Occasionally they'd have a few tracks that were duds, and it was just difficult to overtake. I think the first London tracks were bad at Battersea Park. Was it Battersea Park? Yeah. Where it was just nowhere to overtake on those tracks. So they were pretty bad. And they've got better. The XL London track is amazing compared to Battersea Park. But we're seeing more and more race circuits now, Mexico being one of them. I haven't really looked at the count. We're going to Misano, as I said, with the fast charging, so I know we're going there. That's a race circuit. Portland later in the year is a race circuit. I know there's more than that. I actually haven't really looked at the calendar, so I don't know off the top of my head. But it's just something that's been part of Formula E since the very beginning has been the street circuits. And I can sort of think of a few reasons why they might move away from them. There has been issues with how these races have been set up and issues they've caused in the cities they've been set up in. There was obviously, I did that whole episode on Formula E conspiracies where I talked about some of the issues around having Formula E races in some of these countries. Indonesia was a big one because it was a governor, some money went somewhere it shouldn't have or something, and when he was voted out of office, Indonesia got taken off the calendar. Montreal was a disaster, and again, once the person who had pushed for Formula E to be there was voted out, the new one came in, that was it. It's never going back to Montreal. And Battersea Park was another one I talked about. They're not the only ones. There have been other issues at other street circuits. And moving away from the Rome ePrix, which is another track I've always really liked on the calendar, we're going to Misano instead. Fair enough. It's a shame. It's, as I said, a part of Formula E's identity that's kind of being lost now. And I think, honestly, just the logistics of going into a city, closing bits of it off, large chunks of it, because these tracks are obviously in the miles, and you've got to have grandstands and places for the fans to be, and the crews and the pit stops, and that's all going to be set up, and there's going to be barriers placed up. It's probably a nightmare to set these tracks up. And therefore, these purpose-built race circuits, which are there for motorsport, make complete sense. Places like Monaco, obviously, it's historically part of a small principality, is devoted to motorsport. So it's not, if you live there, it's not a big shock to see bits of the racetrack, or bits that are used as a racetrack, probably cut off from the public. Whereas if you're going to work in Montreal and all of a sudden there's a massive concrete wall in your way because they're building a racetrack there for a weekend, it's probably quite annoying. And in that sense, it makes entire sense to go to race circuits. And they can still do stuff. They've been to race circuits before and changed the layout of them. And I think that works just as well. But I do think they need to consider what their identity is. This Mexico City has had some great races in Formula E. This wasn't one of them. I think we need to look at the track layout, if it works for Formula E, what they can do to make it work better for Formula E. These things are important because you do not want to be turning fans away from electric motorsports right now, because electric motorsports are struggling, and Formula E is really like the one bastion of you can make electric work. Extreme E kind of is the other one, although the fact that they're already pumping for a hydrogen-based support series, I ask questions about actually how much that's working. It's kind of like we've put all our eggs in one basket and it's turned out the basket has a massive hole in it. But there is also this other basket which looks good, kind of thin, and it could do with a few more weaves to get it really up to scratch. But if you put both eggs in both baskets, maybe it'll work out in the future. And I think more and more people are sort of opening their eyes to the fact that it only works in certain scenarios for certain people. I think Tesla's sales have been down, or their profits have been down or something, but honestly, business world stuff goes over my head. I know Ford, they've cut their electric production line back because it's just not making any money. There are signs that electric isn't the future. We're seeing more and more work done on hydrogen. You're seeing hydrogen powered cars on the Dakar over the last couple of years, and that's, I think, motor manufacturers are starting to move towards hydrogen as the future. But honestly, at the moment, it doesn't really matter to the layman. I honestly don't really care what powers the cars as long as it's entertaining racing. That's what I'm here for. I'm a spectator, I'm a fan. Entertain me. That's why I pay my TV license and whatever bills I have to pay to watch motorsport. I pirate most of it. But when I do pay for stuff, that is why I pay, is to be entertained. And honestly, 95% of what I watch on screens is motorsport related these days, which isn't a bad thing. I love motorsport. I watch a little bit of football as well, and that's pretty much it. And that's pretty sad in its own way. But I am really just here to be entertained, and honestly, I don't care if the cars are electric, hydrogen, or you're shoveling coal in them to make them go. I know that the environmental question needs to be asked by these race series nowadays. It's still very hypocritical. I'm entirely certain Extreme E has a very large carbon footprint, no matter how much they push, they don't. I'm sure they're hiding something. I'm sure that Formula E is probably burning holes in the ozone layer as we speak. But as a fan who has no real control over the environment, I just want to be entertained. I honestly, these brief moments in between the darkness of living, it's nice to have something bright in my day, like Formula E, or Extreme E, or Formula 1, or British Touring Cars, or whatever else. Even NASCAR occasionally. So yeah, this race, as I said, was a bit of a downer. I actually don't know when the next race is, or where it is. I honestly haven't checked. But I'll be back to cover Formula E as it progresses through 2024. I'm sure we'll have this discussion again. And honestly, I am looking forward to seeing how the fast charging works when they implement it. Do think it's a bit shifty to do it halfway through a season. Think there could be a better way to do it. There's apparently a Formula E support series, which I actually haven't heard that much about for a while. But if there's anything that comes of that, I'll talk about that as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for all your Formula E news, all your motorsport news, all the content you could ever want. Leave your thoughts down below. Tell me what you thought about this Formula E race. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.